Good evening. Welcome to Mac Commentary. My guest and co-host this evening is Bob. We will continue our discussion of the Justice or Else March called by Minister Louis Farrakhan and other related topics. Good evening, Bob. Welcome to Mac Commentary.
Thank you, Mac, for having me on again. It's a pleasure to be with you.
That's great, Bob, and it's a pleasure also to have you back here. I would like to center our discussion this evening around this question. Do you think Black Americans will achieve their full measure of freedom and economic justice as a result of the Million Man 20th Anniversary Justice or Else March on October the 10th, 2015?
Boy, that's a big question, Mac, but in a simple response, I would say no.
Why would you say no?
Well, I think that we, as a people, and I'm talking about Black people, African Americans, so-called, in the United States, we've been petitioning the American government for many, many years now, and we've been having marches and cries out for freedom, justice, and equality. We just had here recently the 50th anniversary, I think, of the Dr. Martin Luther King speech, where he had a dream of the goodness of America, and yet things have not gotten that much better. So that's why I would say no. Just one aspect of my saying no to this very difficult situation that we as Black people in America finds itself in.
Well, I would hope that the march would achieve much more than just will achieve something much positive, like as expounded by Dr. Claude Anderson in his books Black Labor, White Wealth, and Powernomics, a National Plan to Empower Black America. I mean,
yes,
we have been marching and pleading for the white man to give us this and to give us that. But I believe that the Minister Louis Farrakhan is in a position where he can organize people to come to this march, but at the same time, he can also organize behind closed doors the wealthiest of the people, African Americans, and bring them together and try to build something in a business based on a real entity of whether it's a corporation or LLC or whatever, and not ask them to give anything, but to invest in the Black communities. And that's something that that has to be done, because based on what the business is now in America, only 7% of all U.S. firms are actually owned by Blacks, and only 0.5% of all U.S. earnings are attributed to the Black businesses. And of the U.S. Black firms, only 1.9% of those firms, of the U.S. firms owned by Blacks, have employees. And that's the problem. And another thing is that the Black adult population is 10% of the total U.S. population. Now, I can't think of another race of people in this country who's not exceeding and doing much better economically than Black Americans. I don't think that we can continue to go on. I mean, we've, like you said, we have been pleading and begging from the white man since the emancipation. And I agree that we should have been given some type of reparation and all of that. I agree with that 100%. But it's not forthcoming anytime soon. But because we've achieved some little parity in the economic structure of this country, we should now be able to start our own businesses. And if we have to set up a business in a community where we make brooms, mops, or whatever, and what we have to do, not only have these businesses set up in there, but we have to teach the black people to patronize these black businesses. It's have to take a community effort. It has to take a leadership. And these leaders that want to continue to march on Washington and march on for freedom and all of these type of things, when we already have freedom. We just got to learn how to use this freedom that we have. We don't have to live next door to whites. We don't have to go to the same school as whites. We shouldn't have to, in order to have get a good education or live in good homes. I think we should start focusing on building the businesses as expounded by Dr. Claude Anderson in his book, Powernomics. And I can understand, I know that a lot of people, I've been knowing about Dr. Claude Anderson for 25 years. Matter of fact, I met him and used to talk to him back in the 90s. And I'm sure everybody else out there knows about him. And I want to know what do you think that can be done as a result of this march to start doing something to build businesses in black community and give black people employment in their own communities. Something that all other ethnic groups that come to this country or that's already in this country, they are doing right now. I know that we've been behind the 8 ball for a long time and we have had some problems, but it's time now that we just do what we have to do, because integration destroyed many of our businesses. We were doing pretty well back then. We needed the integration to get jobs and things like that. But I think, like Dr. Anderson said, we need to focus on economic, community, and economics. That's what we need to do. How do you feel about that, bro?
Well, I agree with quite a bit of what you've articulated, Mac. But I would say this: I think that one of the major problems that we have in 2015 is that we are still dealing with the master-slave relationship. Now, what do I mean by that? I think that we would do all of the things that you've articulated with regards to economic development when the Caucasian or white man gives us permission to do that. Now, let me expand upon that point. I heard Dr. Anderson several years ago make this statement. He was out in California on a radio show, and he was expounding his philosophy of how we as a people need to develop ourselves economically. And I agree with all of those points that he's articulated. But this is what happened. It was a call-in show, and while they took a call, the radio host took a call, and from a Caucasian in Mississippi. And the guy called in and he said, "Well, Dr. Anderson, I agree with everything you said. I've been following you for a number of years, and your philosophy is the right philosophy for the black man, but it's not going to work." And Dr. Anderson said that he was somewhat taken aback by this caller, but he asked him, "Well, why not?" He said, "Because you don't have the permission from the white man." He says, "Do this." He says, "The next time you go before a large group of people just do this for me. I'll pay my own way. He said, but take me with you, and I will, after you get through making your presentation to the people, introduce me, and then I will stand up before the audience, and I will say to them, I agree with everything Dr. Anderson says. I'm a white man from Mississippi, and I give you my permission to do what he says to do. I think that what that man said, and from what Dr. Anderson said, it was a heartfelt statement that we, as a people, we are not going to do anything that crosses the line with regards to that slave-master relationship. And I go back to W.E.B. Du Bois, when he talked about the talented tenth. And I got to thinking about this. You know, there's 40 million of us black people in America. If you have a 10% of those people, 4 million, that are doing quite well, what difference does it make what the other 6 million? They could be stealing just to survive, or they could be being shot by police or whatever, but you've got 4 million, and that's a sizable population of people that are doing quite well. I mean, that's over half the population of the state of Michigan, or it's Detroit when it was in its heyday twice over, you know, because Detroit was like 2 million people then. So the point is this. When Minister Farrakhan makes the declaration, justice or else, what is he saying? Is this just another march? Or is he saying to us, who will perhaps participate in that march, justice or else? What does else mean? Is that justice or death? Is he making a declaration, as Patrick Henry said, give me liberty or give me death? Because I can guarantee you this, Mac. I would bet my bottom dollar, when this thing is all over on October the 11th, we will go right back to business as usual in America, because the slave is never going to get the status of the slave master. We've had a black president for the last 6 years, and you see how they've treated him as president, the 44th leader of this nation, and yet he has not been able to. That was the hope it was about. Keep hope alive, and the audacity to hope. Here we have a black man who was from, and I think many of the Caucasians that voted for him voted because they felt in their hearts, well, if we take one of those least liked in society, put him in the White House, maybe those of us who are Caucasian, who are getting kicked in the teeth, and believe me, there's a lot of Caucasians that are being kicked around and being shot by police, but you're not hearing about that, just like there's blacks. Maybe if we put him in the office, maybe we could get some things done. Things have not changed, and October the 11th, things will not have been changed then either. I apologize for my pessimism, but I'll tell you, it's really, really difficult trying to keep hope alive.
Well, you know, Bob, you know, you make some poignant points there, and I do kind of empathize with a lot of things that you say there. However, I'm gonna still try to be optimistic and say, hey, we can make these changes if we can take the leadership that we have now, and especially with Minister Louis Farrakhan. I don't know what his plans really are, but I did hear him say somewhere that he's going to explain what justice is that he's seeking, and also what the else is. So that will be explained at the march. But
yes,
what do you think about this? I understand that he has put out a call for 10,000 men who are ready to die to fight. Have you been able to hear anything about that? And if so, what do you think about it?
No, I'm not. But you know, I'm glad you informed me of that, and I will check that out. But let me say this: if what you suggested, I'm sure you've done your research, so you wouldn't have put that out there to me without having done due diligence. Let me say this: if the minister has called for 10,000 people, which I believe what you said is accurate, then I'm wondering if he is. And let me say this, Mac. You know, we're approaching the 184th anniversary of Nat Turner. You know who Nat Turner is, and probably most of our audience knows who Nat Turner was.
Oh, sure.
It was on August 22nd in 1831 that Nat Turner undertook, and he was a rich man, and that's the reason I say this in concert to Minister Farrakhan. He was a religious man. When they captured him before they beheaded him or hung him, I don't remember which way he died. They asked him why did he do this, and he said that God had told him to undertake that venture. Now, perhaps that's what the 10,000 people are about. Maybe there's a move afoot to rekindle the spirit and the energy of Nat Turner, to get out here and do what Nat Turner did on that first plantation, where he went in and did what he did with his army. They started out with just a few guys and a few slaves like themselves, and then ultimately, and I mean, if you read that story, it's a very poignant story, the journey of Nat Turner. It's a very heart-wrenching understanding of what our people, black people, have done over the 500 years that we've been captives to try and to make life a little bit better for ourselves. But my point is this: if the minister is putting together a force of 10,000 people to counteract or to put in place what that or else means, I think it would be a holy bloodbath, because you could bet your bottom dollar, Mac, that if blacks or any race of people that would attempt to inflict that kind of carnage on America, there would be a force of 5 to 10 times that many that would come against you, and you would have the same outcome as happened with Nat Turner, where they cut off all of his army's heads and placed them on stakes for everybody to see as a symbol that if you ever do this again, this is what will happen to you as well.
Well, you know, there's something in place to counteract that, is my understanding. We don't know the real details of that, but a thesis that was written by President Ronald Reagan's FEMA director. He was a colonel in the U.S. Army. He wrote this in 1970, entitled "The National Survival Racial Imperative," and I understand that it goes into elaborate details about the logistics of rounding up black Americans to be placed in concentration camps.
Oh, wow.
Now, they says this document did not use any code words or euphemisms like many recent comparative documents and policies today. And I'm going to read a little excerpt from this, Bob. It says here, in the past decade, the United States has had an epidemic of confrontations in which outbreaks of bitter racial violence have brought death and destruction and widened the gap between Negro and white. Inevitably, the rise in tensions and mutual distrust have led to more violence and disruption. Now, it goes on to say, and I quote, "As soon as the violence starts, There are similar, though not necessarily pre-planned, outbreaks of violence in other cities across the entire nation. The level of violence has quickly exceeded the control capacity of the various state and local agencies. Federal troops have been requested and already committed. Fierce fighting is taking place in several major cities, and intelligence reports indicate that disorder is likely to spread still further. Large number of United States troops are still committed overseas and cannot be readily recalled to the United States. To further complicate the problem, white vigilante groups have surfaced and are taking independent counteraction against blacks without too much attempt to discriminate between militant and non-militant. Now, we saw some of that in the most recent Ferguson during the celebration of the Michael Brown killing. Well, the oath takers, and these are, my understanding, are a group of men started by an attorney, a lawyer, and they represent the members of the oath takers are former law enforcement and military guys. And they were out on the streets with automatic weapons, while the blacks walked around with cameras. Now, and the police did absolutely nothing. So this goes back to this paper here, which was written back to 1970. Isn't there a very similarity there?
Yes, absolutely, and that hits right. I'm glad that you brought that up back. Years ago, and this your audience can research this. There was an act called the McCarran Act, and I think the guy was a senator or a representative from Nevada. And in the McCarran Act, there was that same thesis that they, just as the Japanese were rounded up during World War II, blacks would be rounded up, and they have concentration camps. I don't know if they still exist, but there were concentration camps all around this country where they would be rounded up and put in those concentration camps. Well, what is this? A lot of us don't know that history. And if you don't know history, as they say, you may well repeat it. Well, as you bring that document up, and that's the most recent document, just in the 70s or the 80s when Reagan was president, that's prominent today, because look at what is happening. All of people act like the death of Michael Brown and these other deaths, and the death of that black man that was shot running away, and the police officer tried to plant evidence on him. That kind of stuff is going on. I saw a report here several weeks ago where a young black lawyer, female, said that a black is killed by the police every 27 hours. But we don't hear about that. And you don't see demonstrations for that. So I think you're absolutely right. And that further buttresses the point that I'm making, that if there are 10,000 people out here, they're going to have to do more than just arm themselves with cameras made by Samsung on a telephone. They're going to have to be prepared for a carnage, anything more than anything you and I have seen in our lifetime. And it won't be, it'll be difficult, but when you consider the fact that there's 350 million of us in America, if 1 million or 2 million, are killed over the course of, say, a 6-month or a 12-month war, that would be considered collateral damage. And we've seen it in other places around the world, and it is going on now as we speak. So what makes us think that it can't happen to us?
Right.
500 years later, it doesn't make any difference. They still just kill you more sophisticatedly.
Well, one thing, if you're going to start any type of insurgent type of warfare, I mean, first of all, you got to have the training. and you got to have the armor necessary to fight a particular war like that. And you got to have a place stash for it. And you got, but as this particular article here points out, when it starts, there's not going to be any type of discrimination between combatants and non-combatants.
Absolutely not.
It's civilians or who. It may be that church-going grandmother of yours who knows nothing about what's happening, but she's going to be slaughtered just like the combatants. You know, that's what.
And that is so such an appropriate and poignant observation you make. There could be 9 people in a church praying to their God, and somebody comes in and wipes them out.
That's right.
So you're absolutely right. It will not distinguish between the person that's praying to God and the person that's praying to the devil.
That's right. And so when you plan something like this, you got to do a lot of planning that has to be covert, and you have to have a plan. You can't announce something like this.
That's right.
I mean, if you're gonna do something, if you're gonna go out there, if you are working in concert with the government, then I say, hey, go ahead and do it and get people killed. You know what I mean?
I understand perfectly what you're saying, and I agree with you.
Now, I've heard about the riots of 1943 in Detroit, and in that riot, that was a heck of a riot, Bob. There was I believe 34 people were killed. Of them, 25 were African Americans, 17 of whom were killed by the police.
Yes.
13 murders remain unsolved. Out of the approximately 600 injured, black people accounted for 75% of the injured.
Yes.
And roughly 1,800 people were arrested over the course of the 3-day riots.
Yes.
Black people accounted for 85% of those arrested.
Yes.
And the whites, well, of course, leaders on both sides had an explanation for the riots. White leaders, including the mayor, blamed young black hoodlums. The Wayne County prosecutor believed that the leaders of the NAACP were to be blamed as the instigators of the riots.
Yes.
Detroit black leaders pointed to other causes, ranging from job discrimination, housing discrimination, police brutality, and daily animosity received from Detroit's white population. Now, Thurgood Marshall, he was with the NAACP, and he assailed the city's handling of the riot. He charged that police unfairly target blacks while turning their backs on white atrocities. Like the white, 85% of those arrested were black, like I stated, while whites overturned and burned cars in front of the Roxy Theater on Woodward with impunity while police watched. Isn't this the same thing that happened in Ferguson there with the oath takers?
Oh, sure.
And if they had,
that's precisely my point. That you go right to the heart of what I suggested earlier, Mac. You see, we have petitioned. You know, look at it like this. Let's say I'm a bad boy and I'm your son, and you say, "Well, Bobby, you know, you're gonna have to change your behavior." But there's something in me. I mean, there's a bad seed in me. You do everything you can. You're my father. And you plead with your son. Change your behavior, boy, because you're making it bad on the house. You know?
right.
And I just won't change. Well, see, you're assuming that your son is a good person. He couldn't be your seed. That's the way I see many of the people who continue to do, and that's why I say I don't think all this marching and petitioning, at least from what I've seen in my lifetime, going to do very much good, because you're petitioning to an entity that you are assuming is going to be good and will hear your admonitions, But in fact, you're petitioning an entity that is bad at the core and doesn't give a damn about your admonitions.
Right. You're so right on that, Bob. And that's why I go back. I can recall back in the late 70s when a white former police officer who had become a federal agent, and he jokingly stated to me that they should take all the whites, black men, no, the blacks, he said, and put them in the state of Mississippi. Then he came back and he kind of restated it. He said, no, just take all the black men and put them in the state of Mississippi. I mean, I didn't think anything. At first, I thought the guy was kidding, but over the years, I've always thought about what he said.
Yes.
So, and as things are developing now, that's exactly how they feel about us.
Yes, many of them actually do. That's right.
I mean, not all. We can't say all, but the whole majority. This was a good guy. You know, he wasn't a bad guy. But,
right.
But that goes.
Well, in fact, you know, today, and just take this little bit of statistic. You know, we have for the last 50 years been talking about integration, right?
Right.
Integrating neighborhoods, et cetera, et cetera. Do you know that if you move into a neighborhood, let's say 100 people in the neighborhood, if you get 12 of us to move into that neighborhood, that'll be 12%. That neighborhood, up until you get 10, people will start feeling a little shaky. They say, you know, Bob and Mac, they just moved into their neighborhood. They number 9 and 10.
There goes the neighborhood.
Larry and Mo move in there 11 and 12. You'll see a mass exodus of those other people out of that neighborhood to the point where that neighborhood will become primarily African American, so-called. And I have seen that here in the city of Detroit. If I look at some of the suburbs around Detroit, I remember Oak Park. Well, I remember Detroit when it was primarily Caucasian. And then I saw the transition from Caucasian to black. And then I saw Oak Park. And then I saw Southfield. And now you're beginning to see Sterling Heights and these other suburbs. Well, what does that mean? That tells me that, just as you said, when people's hearts are not, they may espouse something with their lips, but if their heart is not right, you're not going to be able to change their heart. And I think that goes right to what my original point is, that when you have a relationship between the slave master and the slave master's heart is not right, the slave doesn't have a chance. And that's what we're confronted with in 2015, I believe.
That's absolutely true, Bob, and that's why I keep going back to the same thing. If there are concentration camps out there being ready to place blacks in, then what I propose is that we've had opportunities in some of these cities like Detroit, Atlanta, where if blacks, I don't think that no black man who's gone out there and he's made his money or whatever should give it away. But I think that we should be like other races of people and invest in our communities. And I mean invest where you are going to make money. And this is a subject that we can discuss in further detail, Bob.
Okay.
From the economic standpoint, that this is what needs to be done, because as Maimonides, he was a Jewish philosopher from Spain. He stated, and I quote, "Give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime." Now,
yes,
we don't need anybody when I look at the $1 trillion that goes through the black community, when I look at the multi-millions of dollars that black entertainers and rappers and all these people are making, and they're making them off of the rappers are making it off of the denigration of black people. And somebody told me that 80% or 90% of the records, whatever the music, is purchased by whites. Now that's what I heard. I mean, I'm not, and I will do some more research on that to make sure on that. But I believe I heard the minister say that.
Oh wow, I wasn't aware of that.
And if that's true, then there's a conspiracy right there. If you go out there and I mean, a lot of people out there, I don't believe they have listened to that music, Bob. I mean, and I've researched the lyrics, and some of the things they say in those lyrics, I mean, I'm sure my mother's turning over in her grave if she heard that kind of stuff. You know what I mean?
Surely.
And what happens when kids out there who are not being parented? What happens when they hear that over and over again at a very young age? And we now got them in their 40s that been hearing that stuff like that since they were very young.
That's right.
And now they got kids who are hearing that stuff. And I tell you, that is nothing but psychological warfare, Bob. I made that statement back in the early 90s at the Urban League meeting, and they didn't took it like a grain of salt and said it's part of our culture.
Right.
And I tell you, that warfare, anytime, you just ask any psychologist, any psychiatrist, if you keep giving the same thing over and over to a person, and they taught us that in the Army, which they call psychological warfare, that's all it is. If you get the young people, you teach them that Hitler did it.
That's right.
And they're doing
it right now over in the Middle East.
Right. Look at the kids over there. They strap on the bombs and they just go out there and think nothing of it. Hey, they looking for their 10 virgins.
Yes. Yes.
And is that
well, you're absolutely right, Mac. I mean, that's why it is so refreshing to speak with someone like yourself who I think has a good handle on what is happening in contemporary America. And I'll just say this. I think that is the whole phenomenon, and I know this is kind of changing our topic to some extent, but I think that this is all of the hoopla and the fanfare that is being developed around one of the Republican candidates, Donald Trump. You know, think about this. See, America is based upon the dollar bill, the greenback. And what we're talking about, economic development for the black man, is a part of that greenback phenomenon as well. And all of us, as little boys, when I was a little kid, the one thing I didn't know what it was, but I wanted to be, because I had heard about it, I wanted to be a millionaire. And they even had a program on TV about the millionaire. John Barefoot Tipton, give away $1 million. Well, you know, I don't think any person in America, that male or female, that does not want to be a millionaire. Well, today you have a person in the instance of Donald Trump, who is a billionaire. That's $1,000 million, $1 billion, and he is a multi-billionaire. So people gravitate to him, and we as black people will gravitate to that as well, because we're not really, you know, it goes back to the point you were making. We are interested in material well-being. And Mac, I know you to be a Christian man. You cannot serve two masters. You know, you can't serve God and serve Manman. And we are gravitating to Donald Trump. People are gravitating to him, and we, as a race of people, continue to sell ourselves by trying to serve Manman. I know I may be off topic, but I just had to throw that in because I think it's another distraction, and I wonder if we're really going to get an explanation on October the 10th as to what this real justice or else is all about, or is this just a distraction for some people to make sizable wealth off of it, as the talented 10th continue to do on a daily basis?
For sure, Bob, and I think we will definitely take on this topic more in our next discussion, because I would like to get into the economics aspect of this whole Million Man March and the black community, and things that we can start doing, and things that I'm gonna just give one example right here.
Okay.
Here's a church that's spending $27 million. That's what I've heard, to remodel, expand, and build a parking garage for his parishioners to keep their cars safe. And yet the whole neighborhood around them is crumbling, when they should be out in that community trying to bring people into that church to teach them how to organize businesses, set up a bank, or I understand that particular church has a credit union, and why don't they take that money and put it in there in that credit union and set up an organization where they train people how to run business, and they can invest that money into something that's going to help those people in that neighborhood. And if every